All right, we've got to change Ferks. Dang it. Ferks? We got to change Ferks? All right, we have to change perks. I think overall the perk system, whether you love it or you like it, whether you love it or you hate it, has done a lot of really interesting things. And overall, I'm a huge fan of the system, and I'm a huge fan of the changes that they've made over time. However, there are still a lot of perks that either do way too much, don't do enough, and a lot of perk just kits overall that are way too power loaded or don't have enough power. And so today we're going to be prioritizing, I think, the most problematic perks in Overwatch for both tank, DPS, and support, focusing on the characters that are either over-reliant on perks or just don't have perks that function well enough. Now, a couple of disclaimers about kind of like what we're looking at here. I generally like perks to be a little bit more transformative. This is my fundamental goal of perks for me as a person, philosophically, is I like perks that are more transformative or at least fun, because I think if anything is needed for a character's kit to function, I generally think that should just be added to their base kit. I wish perks were more fun, more flavor, more transformative, and less just net buffs, because in my opinion, anything that a character needs to be done with the base kit, because that leads to a lot less variance in output. And it also means that we don't have noob trap perks that become, well, you should have to pick that perk if you want to play that character. That just to me is a huge problem with the current implementation of the perk system. And I think that even as a criticism of Season 19's balance changes, where we've seen a lot of perk changes, well, a few perk changes, but nothing really done to the base kit of the character, which just means that we have a lot of volatility and disagreement about the actual power state of the character. So today, we're going to be focusing on making perks a little bit more transformative. Base kits, we're not going to be talking about base kits as much, but just in general, more transformative, in general, a little bit less powerful, and base kit additions should be encouraged if we are taking stuff away. Generally here, just for the nature of this video, we are going to be focusing on either easy fixes or big offenders. So we're not going to be focusing on every single character or every single perk. We're just going to be focusing on the low-hanging fruit, because they're either really offensive or they're not that offensive, but it shouldn't take that long to fix them. A couple of tweaks that kind of fall along that line is we're going to start off with Bastion here. We're not going to talk about the power state of Bastion, balance, win rate. I don't care about any of that. This is only going to focus on his state in relation to his perks. I think his first minor perk, which is the one that gives him the nade reset, is just simply too strong. Pause. I need to move my face. Whee! First, we're going to talk about his minor perk. I actually like both the minor perks from a design perspective a great deal. I just think that the minor perk that resets nade on every form transition is just too strong. And because you need ult perks to be overwhelmingly strong to be worth picking, I think, unfortunately, this just a really cool perk in an armored artillery is just not good enough in comparison to configuration reload. I like the idea of refreshing your tactical nade. I just don't think it needs to refresh on every time that you use your form. So what I would recommend is that I actually have it to give you a nade reset, not on entering your turret form, because you already have lots of reasons to do that when you're playing Bastion. And it needs to be done when you're exiting your nade turret form. So you have a reason to cancel your turret form early if you like to, or you have enhanced mobility on leaving your turret form, and I think giving it the full reset after you use your ultimate is fine too. So just a small tweak to make the perk a little bit less strong, still interesting, still transformative, and still useful to play with. Next up, let's do Soldier 76. So I think Soldier 76 minor and major perks are okay. In general, though, I'm not a huge fan of his recycled pulse munitions. Generally, the way that you play Soldier is more often than not on duels. You're going to be opening with Helix and transitioning into primary fire to boop the target, to open with your projectile, and then lead into hit scan, and so on. I just don't find consistent value out of recycled pulse munitions. I think you could definitely give him over ammo when he hits it. So in other words, if you open with this and then you use your pulse, or if you use your, let's say your Helix rockets into your primary fire, they actually over ammos you from 30 bolts to 35 or 40. That could allow for more consistent pressure. Now, and I understand the criticisms that that's not transformative. The whole point is we're trying to change the cycle of how you're using Helix rockets. I just don't know if there's an easy solution for that. One thing that you could do is that you could have increased knockback on your Helix rockets. So if you don't know already, if you use your jump and Helix rockets at the same time, it does allow you a little bit of mobility. But why not letting us do that even further? If you combo that with sprint, maybe there's even a situation where you can make stuff like Zarya's alt fire. You could actually reach his verticality that you otherwise couldn't reach. So again, transformative, nothing super major, but allows for you to use your like that, but to be able to do it just a little bit further could be cool. just a slightly more interesting transformative option because I do think the other perk isn't really that interesting, nor is it that particularly useful. Scrolling down to my notes. Notes. Okay, let's talk about Wrecking Ball here. So I think my general feedback for Wrecking Ball is I think that his perks are just way too strong. He has so much of his power, and all 4 of his perks are all pretty good, pretty decent situational. I think the minor perks are okay. I don't really have a main criticism for the minor perks too much, but I do think the adaptive barrier one probably needs to be looked at. I think both perks are good here, but I don't like the fact that it has a 1.5 second parry. I think the whole point of a parry is that it needs to have the timing right, but 1.5 seconds is kind of ridiculous. I wouldn't mind this being reduced to 1 second so that this shield lasts long enough that it's good if you get the timing relatively correct, but it just not that it's not so forgiving. Now, the problem with that is if you nerfed it to 1 second, I could see the argument that then you just always use the slam perk, but that's because the slam perk is also ridiculous. So I really think both of Ball's major perks need to be nerfed, just not only for the character's strength as a whole, but I think way too much power is in either major perk, and I think that's probably the best way to approach it. I don't know what I'm doing here. Okay, Ryan perk. Okay, I'm going to be honest with you guys. Bring back Crusader's Resolve. The Crusader's Resolve, if you guys don't know, was using your shield, I think doubled or more than doubled the time for the passive heal that you get in Overwatch to kick back in again. They removed this with a more transformative perk where distance traveled while using charge regenerates your barrier health. And because it's still a bad perk, they buffed it by 50 health. The problem with that is that it misses the point of why people weren't picking it or why people don't like it. It's because it's not transformative enough. And even if it is transformative, it's not transformative in a way that's interesting. You see, Reinhardt's value is already front-loaded into his shield. When you're using Rein's pin, the vast majority of the time, you're not doing it to generate more shield, you're doing it to reposition or disengage. And more shield and more shield and more shield, transformative or not, it's not really, is just not an interesting expression of a skill. The irony is that while Crusader's Resolve was only a little heal kicking in faster, it was much more transformative because it encouraged a transformative playstyle. It didn't just change how you use the cooldown, it changed how you could actually position with Rein because you were more self-sufficient, especially in maps that are a lot more broad. You weren't as reliant off of your team healing. You see, Crusader's Resolve wasn't good in the middle of team fights. It was good in setup, pre-fight, rotating, taking space, and taking off angles around your team, which is a little bit different than Rein. And now that that perk has been removed, that playstyle, that creativity that should be baked into Reinhardt more is gone. And not to mention, it also is a really fun playstyle, and now that's gone as well. So we not only do we have a less interesting gameplay, game design, health design, it's just less fun to play as well. They need to bring this back. I appreciate the experiment. It's just failed. We need to go back. It's okay to learn from our mistakes, revert the change. And then if we have that, I understand there's some criticisms with some of his other perks, but we actually have a situation with Crusader's Fire where you have a good perk in compressed maps, Crusader's Resolve, a good perk in more open maps. And the same thing goes for both of his majors. Shield Sam is okay in close maps, but it's actually a little bit better when you're kind of more isolated doing your own thing, whereas Ignited Fury feels a little bit better in more compressed maps. Again, I know there's criticisms for those perks, but again, we're choosing big low-hanging fruit here, and I just think replacing Crusader's Resolve or bringing it back in is a really low-hanging fruit. A couple more tweaks here. We're going to talk with Hazard. They buffed this perk, but again, it just feels like they completely missed the point of why people weren't using this perk, and by that I'm referring to Anarchic Zeal, which has lifesteal. The problem? It's very little healing. And AoE lifesteal is also not that good. Deep Leap gives you more range and more speed on your Violent Leap, and it's just incredibly consistent and incredibly good for all situations. You have literally zero reason to choose anything other than this. And increasing lifesteal by 5% doesn't change the problem. We need more reasons not to use our guard, or we need different reasons to use our guard. Giving it lifesteal means it's still about mitigation, and nothing's changed from that. This just needs to go. This completely misses the point of why people weren't using this perk, and also why people don't like using guard, period. I don't think it's strong enough. Instead, I would like something a little bit more transformative, or at least something interesting. I'm not so confident in this one, but I thought it'd be fun. What if you were allowed to hold space as a Spider-Man on the wall by using crouch on the wall? So you go up, you press your crouch button, and you can hold onto the wall. So you're actually able to hold your verticality as so on. It does not reset your wall climb, that's worth noting, but it allows you to hold different positions and hold different angles and set up. Would that be fun? Sure. Would it be good? I don't know, but at least it's fun. Lifesteal in this regard isn't fun or transformative enough. At least holding on the wall is different. And even if we don't like that change, we replace it with something else, then it cannot be something that just gives you more mitigation on your guard. It needs to be something that completely changes how you use the ability, even if it's in a small way. Venture. Okay, so I said that I was going to run naked. I was going to streak in my neighborhood if they didn't nerf the range perk, and it turns out that I had to do that, and I actually spent some time in a jail cell last week. But as of now, I don't think that the range perk is too broken, because I underestimated how punishing the projectile speed was with Smart Extender. The problem is that we have a relatively decent perk. Okay, maybe the Venture shouldn't have range like this, but we have Covered in Dirt, which just isn't really all that good. So maybe a Smart Extender needs a slower fire rate when Venture's firing. That way you could still use it for shield reset, and also it's also a reload, so there's a lot of ways to use it. So I would like that. But I think we actually need to talk more about Smart Extender here. I feel like it's just you always pick the range perk and there's no situation to pick Smart Extender. Now, before some Venture main chat goes off, yes, I know it used to be much stronger, and I know what it used to do. It used to fully regenerate your shields, but that was a bug, and that was way, 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 way too strong. I don't really have an obvious solution for what we do differently here, because it definitely feels awkward to give Venture different variety in what they do, because do you give Venture more range? Well, I don't think so. Do you give Venture more mobility? I don't think so. Do you give Venture more deep burst DPS? Well, I don't think so. But I definitely think they need to put some time into both of Venture's major perks. Probably nerf the extent of Smart Extender by a little bit. Maybe a short-term solution could be bumping Covered in Dirt's shield regeneration, so it's at least usable in situations when you're up close, but kind of understanding that. Range perk is great design. I'll never understand this take. I can't explain it for you if there is not a single highly mobile character that has range on that bay. There's not a single character in Overwatch that has range. Mobility and range are against each other. You can't have your cake and eat it too. And so what ends up happening is that the reason why Venture can get away with it, quote unquote, is because the projectile speed is so slow to the point where it's honestly not even that useful. Like the reason that the range perk is quote unquote good is more for the utility of shield reset and an ammo reload. You don't even really use it for the range all that much. So it's like, it just doesn't make sense. Yeah. All right, Reaper. Boy. Okay, so a lot of things happened with Reaper back when I took my initial notes here. First things first, Lingering Wraith is a new one. You get increased movement speed after Wraith. I actually think this perk is pretty good. In fact, it's so good, there's just no situation to choose Soul Reaving entirely at all. But I'm kind of disappointed that we've now locked all the major transformative perks behind majors. Like I said, I just think I disagree with the developers about when these transformative perks need to come in. I know why they come in later because it feels more meaningful in your gameplay loop, but with certain compositions, Reaper kind of likes Dire Triggers or Shadow Blink earlier. Like it's needed in certain matchups, right, to be able to do that. And locking it behind, again, transformative perks later. I have another video coming out later about my problems with perks. We talk more about this in detail. Basic TLDR is transformative perks coming earlier, even if they're weaker, is good because it allows you to outplay, counterplay things, play the map much sooner, and it just makes it feel a lot better. Problem that we have here is now that Shadow Blink and Dire Triggers are a little bit more transformative about Reaper's playstyle, and they're both locked behind majors now. The other problem as well is that we still haven't removed Soul Reaving. It is horrible. What I would like is if they need to nerf Shadow Blink, or if they need to do something with it, fine. But I'd like Shadow Blink and the old teleport buff, which was an increased distance. I'd like those to be the minor. So you have to choose either a further teleporter that has decent speed, or a faster teleporter, shorter teleporter that's faster, either a short or a fast teleporter, right? And you could choose which one depending on the situation. I think that would make a lot more sense, but my goodness gracious, Soul Reaving has to go. We need to find some way of making Reaper a little bit more transformative. Maybe even Dire Trigger sooner and then moving Lingering Wraith to later. I think the Lifesteal one wasn't even necessarily that bad. Maybe it wasn't that good, but it was at least an interesting idea and so on. But yeah, we must remove Soul Reaving. I think we need to have different teleport options sooner available for Reaper, either for further or for shorter or for faster. Or maybe even if we had a sustain thing that wasn't reliant completely on your heal passive. I'm not sure.
We were back in 2018 lol.
Hello, Lightwaves. Okay. So those are going to be those are going to be the tweaks that we talked about. We're going to go a little bit more in depth for all the future characters because I don't think that they have like one or two small issues. I think it's going to be a little bit more complicated than that. And we're going to start off with Zarya. So the alt fire perk is just really, really strong. It's not particularly transformative. I like the concept of allowing Zarya to maintain charge more consistently when she can't really contribute. And I also like the fact that she actually has to use alt fire instead of primary fire. But this is just really, really strong. And the fact that it's AoE just makes it even better. So I think we got to be really careful with this perk. And I also think Lance is the same. So I'm talking about the beam piercing enemies while over 50 energy. It's just too good. In situations where people are just grouping up. It's not particularly transformative. It's not particularly interesting. Here are some ideas. I would like a charged up alt fire option. You hold your right click, you charge up your alt fire, and it launches. And what that does is it significantly increases the projectile speed of the alt fire at the expense of the rate of fire. So you're able to contribute from far away. It noticeably does not increase the damage of your alt fire, just the projectile speed. Doesn't buff things that she's already good at. It just helps her in bad matchups, and it's engaging as a player. I wouldn't mind if they kept Energy Converter, actually. I think as a concept, it's pretty good. But if you think about what Zarya struggles with, it's more broad, wide open compositions. And so I don't think they need to get AoE value here. Because if you're playing versus a clumped up composition, Zarya is already fine in those matchups. It really should just be one hit gives you 2 or 3 energy. I think nerfing it to 2 would be fine. Does not AoE multiply. Maybe an ammo reduction to your ultimate fire so you can have more consistent uptime from pressure. Heck, you could even have the energy that you gain scale off of the distance the alt fire travels. So you think, where is Zarya really weak? Well, it's not up close, right? So if you hit somebody up close, you get 1 energy. But if I alt fire a target 25, 30 meters away, I get 3 or 4 energy, right? So you actually, in matchups where Zarya is bad, you can either charge up your alt fire with 1 perk, or we can keep Energy Converter, or both, to where you can actually get more energy the farther you hit the shots. So you're just, again, helping Zarya's matchups, making it more interesting, making it more transformative in situations where it's good. And I think Energy Lance is the one that needs to go. I think Energy Converter is the one that needs to change, but I do like jump ups and I do like spotter. I do like both of those. I think they're transformative and interesting enough. We want something that changes your decisions or makes your decisions more interesting. You just need to maintain your charge and spread open fights and dive. And I think both of the perk adjustments help with that a little bit. Like, you could even make it easier with, like, think about it this way. If Energy Converter could even give you 4 or 5 energy on long alt fire. So really bad matchups for Zarya feel way better, but the brawly ones don't feel much better at all. Okay, Ashe. Boy, this one was tough. Ashe just feels like such a nice character. I really enjoy Ashe. I love coaching her. I love playing her. But I think a lot of her perks just aren't all that interesting or that transformative. I actually think that people really miss the mark, and I've been consistently trying to preach the gospel of the first minor perk. The Remote Detonator is an amazing perk in terms of transformative. It completely changes how and when you use Dynamite. It allows you to consistently take duels versus bad matchups more consistently. It allows you to Dynamite from range. It's not really a noob trap about, oh, it's just easier to land Dynamite. It just makes it a lot better, more consistent, and changes the way that you use Dynamite. You can use your Dynamite and actually hit it and use your follow-up shot for immediate burst damage. You can do it behind corners. You can do it behind walls. You can actually Dynamite your feet and walk away and then Dynamite to preserve your life. You can Dynamite from longer ranges while you're shooting another target. You can multitask. It's just really good, and people need to figure out that this perk is actually pretty decent. The problem I actually have are more the other perks that aren't as interesting or a little bit less useful to do. I think things like detonating Dynamite for lava pools. So if Dynamite is detonated on or near the floor, something that you normally don't always do with Ashe, you get a little lava pool that does a small amount of DOT or whatever else. It would be transformative. It would be strategic. It could be used for zoning. It could be used preventatively. It would change how you'd use Dynamite than how you would normally use Dynamite. That's kind of what we're looking for. A different decision, different value, more strategy, more thinking. I think Coach Gun could have a reduced cooldown if it doesn't hit a target. Heck, you could even have 2 versions of Coach Gun, but that do much weaker damage. More rotations. One of Ashe's big problem, especially in the higher levels when dive is meta, is that she's generally way too reliant off of Coach Gun for rotations or defense. She has to do one for rotation or one for defense. Well, what if I used it for rotation, but because it didn't hit a target, its cooldown is reduced by 4 seconds. So then I'm able to more rotate and proactively engage in the fight more consistently. I don't want Ashe to be a dive hit scan like Sojourn necessarily, but we can address some of those pain points in a transformative way through perks. You could also make the Coach Gun does more damage, a little bit less knockback, or something in between, where a Coach Gun could do, well, let's see what it does right now. Something like that, but does 40% more damage, but 40% less knockback. So all of a sudden, Ashe can get her hands dirty a little bit. Maybe her unscoped damage does a little bit more, but scope does a little bit less. Something that allows you to change the angles that you're taking with Ashe depending on the situation, that allows you to rotate more or get your hands dirty a little bit more often. Basically, I just find a lot of both her major and minor perks not all that transformative, either free value or things that don't really change how you use the ability at all. And I think there are some missed opportunities with this character. Okay, let's talk about Mei really fast. So obviously I like what they did with both the minor perks. I think the problem with Mei is more to do with the scale of power. Wait, what just happened? Oh, thank you for the gifted subs, Lightwaves. You're ruining my YouTube talk, but thank you. That's very generous of you. Holding up? That's not the button you meant to click? Get fricked! Get fricked! Let's go! Let's go! My coffers are overflowing! Oh, Discord mod would never be generous with me. No refunds! Frick you, buddy! Haha, we love that. Okay, I gotta get back in here. Okay. So yeah, I actually really like Mei's minor perks from a transformative standpoint. They definitely open up different options, and they're a lot of fun to play with. The problem, and I'm trying not to get sucked into it, is that in comparison to other characters, her perks aren't strong enough, and I think this is a global problem with perk design as a whole. But fundamentally, I think they're okay. I think maybe something like her ult has a slightly broader radius, or the speed boost or heal boost on the ult is a little bit stronger, because I think the idea of an ult perk is always a little bit of a gamble, because it could be interesting, but ults don't come off enough for them. So all the ult perks in Overwatch that are good are generally more like broken for them to be picked. I love what they did with Glacial Propulsion, which removed it, put on a separate cooldown. I think that was a correct play. But we're going to talk about a couple of other options specifically with their major perks. So I don't like hard freeze. And I know some majors are going to be like, rah, rah, rah. It's just not interesting. It is the least interesting utility that Mei provides, especially in Overwatch 2. And I like the idea of Cryostorm. I just don't like the execution because, again, it's not transformative enough. It's kind of free value. And I have a bunch of ideas that can actually make this character a lot more interesting. Ice Block, we've talked about this, was one of the ones I did way back in the day. I think Cryostorm can work if you get the damage on leaving the Ice Block, so a small burst of damage. So you're rewarded for leaving Ice Block early to get the combo or the timing right. It allows you to play mind game in duels instead of just, I'm going to AoE and do DOT and my Ice Block. I want a reason to leave Ice Block early or to get the timing right, to catch people off guard. I think that's a huge missed opportunity with this penalty, or with this perk. We talked about the Blizzard range, slightly bigger, more DOT, more faster, more healing, more speed boost. I would love if they gave Mei Boulder from Stadium. Now, they would need to shrink the size. They'd need to probably remove the knockback as well, maybe even remove the damage penalty entirely. But being able to move with Ice Block is really cool. I think people have a negative perception of that compared to Stadium because it is wildly overpowered in Stadium from that perspective, at least from what I know. But I think that's really cool. Being able to reposition and move in Ice Block is cool if it's not done in the exact same way. I think the floor freeze concept, the floor freeze concept that we've talked about is like, oh, they don't want people looking at the ground. But who's to say that you couldn't do this while you're spraying in front of you? Why couldn't this allow me to spray the floor while I'm spraying in front of me so that whenever I'm using primary fire, I'm moving faster? As long as I can't freeze people solid, maybe it's still useful for rotations and for positioning. Now, I can already hear the, oh my gosh, there's a speed boosted Mei freezing me at the same time, slowing me. But again, as long as she's not freezing you solid, it's not a huge problem because Mei is still vulnerable during that animation in Overwatch 2. So something to consider. I think the Ice Boulder is an obvious one. The Burst and Ice Block is also an obvious one, and probably also a buff to the ult if we want to keep it. But there's a lot of interesting things to do in this character. I really enjoy playing Mei a great deal, and I would love to see some of these changes. Oh, gosh. Okay, let's go on to Symmetra here. Okay, let's move on to Symmetra. Again, very utility-focused DPS that I think a lot of her perks are interesting, but not quite. I really like Symmetra's kit. I like utility. I think the first one we're going to criticize is the more turret-centric capacity. It's not super engaging. It's actually pretty niche and pretty weak in comparison to perfect alignment. I know some people don't like that perk as much, but it is just significantly better in basically every single circumstance, because the problem is that you have a situation where your perks still have the same cooldown. So getting an extra turret is basically only useful at the start of fights. And after that, it just kind of becomes irrelevant. The shield is neat as well with the hovering barrier, but it's just not really worth giving up your teleporter almost without exception. The rotations, whether it's as a team or more often than not using it for yourself, for an off angle, even the heal off of the teleporter, there's just in almost no situation do you choose the shield. Now, I know there's going to be plat, diamond, whatever, bronze, but I picked the shield. I'm sorry. You're wrong. The vast majority of the time, rotations and self-heal on teleporter is always the better play, as is the increased range and projectile and her primary fire. The things that might change that would be other things. Here's one of them. Turret use is allowed while you're using your weapon, including charging up your orbs. Now, you might ask yourself a question. Why would that be relevant? Well, because turrets can be used to parry. You can use it to block damage, block cooldowns. Heck, we can even increase the size of your turret hitbox by a little bit. But now you can actually do it while you're doing damage. Changes how you use turrets. Makes that matchup significantly more interesting. And I don't want to hear it, but not everyone may know how to use it. I don't care. It's cool for the people that want to put time into it, and we can develop a community where we actually start to think about Symmetra in a slightly different way. You cannot cater to the lowest common denominator. I'm not saying we have to cater to pros by any means, because as you've seen, the lowest common denominator is not even using the character in the right way anyway. You kind of have to encourage them to use it the right way, and I think this is the exact kind of way to do that correctly. Faster cast with turrets even, lower cooldown maybe. Maybe we reduce the amount of slow and damage that turrets do, but make them more as utility in this aspect. I don't really care. I wouldn't mind using teleporter charges your next orb faster, so your attack speed is increased by 20% for 2 seconds after you use teleporter on your first use. If we do end up removing the teleport heal, then well, I mean, we could maybe keep the teleport heal and shield battery, but I do think that we should probably reduce the teleport health a little bit. Oh, another idea as well was I wouldn't mind if we gave turrets a small shield heal. Now, I know some of you guys are like, oh gosh, we don't want the healing with turrets, but why not? Now, you might be like, well, that would be too much sustain, like, because you know, she could heal herself with her teleporter and heal herself with the turrets. Well, then maybe there's a cap of how much it actually heals for. Or maybe we remove the teleporter heal and instead do it that Symmetra can heal herself with her own turrets instead. Or even healing allies for it, like the old shield generator, like the teleporter or turret while it's alive can heal a teammate. Maybe we increase the HP of turrets when they do that, but they don't do damage anymore. Maybe we do a Reaper teleport treatment where it has less HP, but the cast of the teleporter is slightly faster. There's just a lot of ideas here where we could make turrets more for support. If we nerf other aspects of her survivability, we could have her projectile or her alt fire charging up faster. Now, Symmetra is actually a pretty strong character right now, so I do think that we're going to have to look at some base kit changes specific to like her teleport health, maybe even into her ultimate. But like turret parry, turret for supports, for sustain, that isn't just about damage and slow. I love the wall hacks with turret. Faster teleports, different teleports, faster attack speed on taking teleporter. There's so many things that they could do with this character, and I just think giving her more projectile, another teleporter, or sorry, another turret, and giving her shield just isn't all that interesting. In terms of shield, if we were to make shield work, I don't know if there's an easy solution. Teleporter is way too powerful of a cooldown right now. The only thing that I could maybe think of is maybe the shield does a small amount of damage itself if it passes through a target, but it's a really difficult situation. Teleporter should share HP between hitboxes. Oh, yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's not a bad idea for a balance, yep. Okay, let's talk about Tracer. Getting me similar to Wrecking Ball, where she just has overtuned perks. It's not just that Tracer's strong right now. She just has one of the strongest perk sets in the game. And so you have to be really careful about what you do. And I actually like her new melee perk that they gave her. And I really don't mind the health pack perk either. Conceptually, I think they're really good perks, really cool ideas, but the execution of a couple of them needs to be done better. And then we got to talk about the major perk situation, which, to be fair, as of this recent patch is a lot better. But we'll talk about some things here. So overturned perks and some just that aren't worth using. Number one, the health pack perk. You cannot use this perk at full HP. I think it's the number one reason why this perk is broken, because you can just run over health packs and steal them at full HP, which gives you just crazy rollouts. Also really changes a lot of duel situations here. I think simply making that change alone would introduce a lot more thought into whether you should be choosing the melee perk instead. And if the melee perk still isn't good enough in comparison, then allow it to overfill your ammo by 5 or 10 bullets. So the problem right now is if you choose the melee perk that gives you ammo when you melee, it only works if you're missing ammo. It's the same thing as a soldier helix perk. It doesn't give me free ammo. So I have to use my bullet and then melee and get the value out of it. And that's not something that every tracer player is going to be able to use. Now, I don't mind the concept of perk because not every low-level player needs to utilize it, but I do think that the health pack perk is overtuned on that aspect and probably should be considered. Now, a couple of other ideas for major perks. I think Flashback is awkward, as is Quantum Entanglement, because they aren't really all that transformative. Quantum Entanglement is in theory transformative to a very, very, very small extent because it gives you a bigger clip, right? But the problem is that Flashback just allows you to continue your aggression for longer post-recall in a more balanced way than it did before, but it's still really strong. What I would consider is, could recall do a small pulse and damage? Could there be a small heal over time post-recall where you recalled to encourage continued combat that isn't correlated only with blinks? Could you use Pulse Bomb on something and then you press the button again to detonate? So it's a delayed detonation like Dynamite. I do like the new recall perk better, but I just don't think there's still as much choice as there ought to be. And I think the hardest part of Tracer is that it feels hard to give her transformative perks when it feels like she already has everything that she needs. She's a really tight hero design, but there's still a couple other things that they could experiment with, and I think that's what I would consider. To be honest with you, if they didn't really change much besides changing the miners and making the miners a little bit more thoughtful and maybe some tweaks to the major would be okay. So maybe more tweaks for Tracer than anything else. Okay, Ana. Man, Ana is also a hot one with a crit perk that we recently had. Okay, so let's talk about it. Groggy is frustrating. Balance Aid is very inconsistent or accidental. It's just very, very strong in small rooms. And then at longer ranges, it's more about like rewarding missed nades, and it's really not as transformative as it seems. I remember people were talking about like, oh, you can bounce your nade and skill. Nobody does that. Nobody does that. Bounce nade is good for two reasons: the missed anti-nade that actually hits the backline anyway because of the bounce, or number two, you're fighting a Genji in a small room. I coach and play a ton of Ana, and this is all it's done. The other problem we have as well is with the crit perk, which went from being kind of niche because it's really hard to aim for people's heads. It's muscle memory and awkward, not enough reward in comparison with Bounce Nade, to where now it's 200%. And it's freaking broken. Now, it still is something that takes a lot of skill to aim, and it comes very late, so it's not always very relevant, and Biotic Bounce is still good, but we got a lot to talk about with Ana. First things first, I think the biggest change to Groggy, which I've suggested for 6 months now, is that, longer than 6 months, is sleep needs to give you a speed boost, whether you hit it or not. What that means is that rather than this horrific slow for the person, it allows you to use your sleep dart and rotate. And heck, you're actually thinking, should I even use my sleep dart when I'm not under pressure because I really want to rotate fast? Maybe I sleep dart a tank across the map and I rotate off of that. It's a way, I don't want to give Ana mobility, but giving her a rotation option is probably the best benefit. And I think it's better generally to avoid debuffs when there's still space for mobility. Like, we don't have to give Ana a slow. I think giving her a small speed boost like Brigitte after Shield Bash is a better version of the exact same concept. I generally think, I'm going to talk more about Kit with Ana. I probably should have done this with a couple other characters, but we'll do it just briefly with Ana because some of my perk ideas have to do with this. I think her nade cooldown has to come down to 12, 11 seconds at least. If that means nade does less damage, that's fine. If it means nade duration lasts longer, that's fine. Because the concept with nade is that I have here is that I would love to see nade targets receive 50% more shot damage on the next shot done. So you're encouraged to use nade as more of a combo tool, not just nade the enemy tank, not just a self-defense tool. However, you can't do that with a 14-second cooldown. It doesn't work. Obviously, again, you need to nerf the damage and the healing and the anti-nade aspect of nade as well, but we need to have a situation where you're going to use nade more for combos rather than just simply using it for self-defense or nading the enemy backline. I still think that crit perk comes incredibly late. It's very swingy. It's still a very inconsistent perk. It's super strong, super awkward. It's never going to feel right in its current state, in my opinion. But yeah, I think just generally, I would love to see a speed boost off of Sleep Dart instead of the slow. And then crucially, as I said, I would love to see them try to use Nade as like a combo tool instead. But you're going to have a lower cooldown and a slightly weaker Nade as a result for that to work. We'll talk about Brig. I think aspects of her perks are cool. I like the burst heal and inspire. It's a pretty neat idea. Brig has a lot of bugs right now and a lot of quality of life issues, which we won't talk about as much in this, but I think aspects of her perks are cool. Others feel like accidental value or they're not transformative enough. The speed boost often just feels too important off of her major perk to be not used. I think Whiplash is nice, but Inspiring Strike is just too consistent in terms of value, rotation, disengage, and so on. I think we need to reposition the transformative perks. Again, I think we need transformative perks earlier on. We've already talked about that. Situations where you need to move around as Brigitte, it becomes too important to have that earlier in the match rather than later. And unfortunately, we don't get Inspiring Strike until very late. I wouldn't mind if they restored the Shield Bash giving HP, Shield Bash HP back. I think giving HP with Shield Bash was relatively transformative and made you think about the timing of when you're using the ability a lot more. I like the Burst Inspire. That's cool from a power standpoint, but it's not as transformative as you think. I think giving you a reason to use Shield Bash at a certain time because it gives you HP back is very interesting. In addition to that, one of my viewers suggested, and I really like it, Shield Bash has a parry that reduces the amount of the damage that your shield takes if you bash at the right time. In other words, when you're bashing during an animation of an ability, like let's say Hanzo's damage, what is it, 125, something like that, right? 125 for Hanzo. If I bash during that, it reduces the amount of damage that the ability does to my shield by 50% or even more. Wow, that was funny. So if I bash time correctly, I actually preserve more of my shield HP. So it's not a true parry, but it is a damage reduction on my shield HP if I get the timing right. So it actually rewards offensive behavior if you get the timing right. I've said this before, I would still love armor pack to give overhealth. You're not armor, overhealth. You definitely need to keep an eye on that one. 25 overhealth could be really strong for certain characters, but I definitely think it's the more interesting aspect of armor pack because it really isn't used as proactively as it used to be. So keep an eye on that one, but I would love a situation to pack somebody before they've engaged. Again, transformative, thoughtful. It also rewards preventative action and preparation as a Brigitte, or even anticipation as a Brigitte, as in, I think this target's going to get pressured, so I'm going to go ahead and proactively pack them. A huge aspect of her skill expression that's not really there right now. Potentially omnidirectional bash, like bashing up. I don't really want to give her a crazy mobility, but it is an idea that's worth considering. And another one that we could also do is that whip damage scales based off of how far it goes. So 70 damage here, but then if I use whip at full distance, what is full distance for whip? Is it here? Feels like that here feels about right? Then it does an extra 20, 30, 40 damage. So there's situations when you're farther away from targets, but you're still able to contribute. We had so many ideas for Brigitte. Armor pack or overhealth on packs on targets that get it. Parry timing with shield, restoring your shield HP, whip damage scaling, omnidirectional bash. There's actually so many things that they could do with this character, and I think there's a lot of missed opportunities that makes this character feel a lot better in bad matchups and just a lot more interesting and transformative to play. Oh, gosh. Okay, two more. I'll talk about Juno. Juno's going to be pretty simple. Go back with a couple of these. It feels like we really regressed on a lot of the more fun and interesting perks, notably the crit perk being missed as the hero felt really engaging because part of Juno's design is just consistent pressure, consistent uptime, not this big burst of dopamine with the exception of huge torpedoes, which doesn't always happen, but it's consistent uptime of pressure. And of all the crit perks in the game, like increased crit damage, I think it felt by far the most satisfying, most useful, and most healthy with Juno. 1.5, consistent damage, consistent healing. It felt good. Please bring it back and don't take it away. It felt amazing. And I think most Junos would agree with that. The problem that we have with Faster Blaster is that it's the active uptime while you're using Glide Boost, but it feels awkward to have to use your mobility cooldown that should be used for rotations mostly as an offensive tool. If you have your mobility tool, you should probably be rotating, not standing still just so that you could do consistent damage. In addition to that, it's also just not all that good. It's good in certain situations, but most of the time it's not all that good. So there's a lot of missed opportunity with that. I think they need to go back with that particular perk choice. A couple of other ideas. I would love to see a boosted speed ring range. Maybe this is more of a base kit change that I've been asking for a while. They did buff it by 5 or 10 10 meters on launch. I think it can go even further, so she's better in more broad open situations. I know I've asked for this before. I know it's an animation issue. I don't care. I'm a spoiled, rotten content creator brat. I want to shoot while torpedoing. And there's a reason why that's the case. It's not because I want to be able to do this because I like it. It's because the whole point of torpedoes is exclusively AoE value. It's really bad in 1v1s. I want it to remain inferior in 1v1s. However, if I can shoot while torpedoing, there's actually a situation where I can defend myself much more consistently versus diving targets. So now I have a situation if I'm being pressured, where do I want to use torpedoes while I'm dueling the target, which allows me to duel the target more easily. But if I do that, then I lose the AoE value, especially if I have the torpedo reset reduction cooldown. Oh my gosh, what do I do? That's what perks should be doing. It gives you more options, but there's still a cost to using your torpedo in a 1v1. Sure, you'll force a tracer recall faster and maybe live, but maybe you would have lived regardless. And now you can't do as much AoE value. I know that's an animation problem, but this is a choice that's just not here with Juno. And man, I would kill if you could actually do this. It would make this character a lot more fun and a lot more interesting to play. So much so that I even hesitate to ask for it as part of the perks, because honestly, maybe it should just be more interesting as a base kit. Regardless, give crits back, boost speed ring range, and maybe even a shorter glide duration with a lower cooldown. I hear that this is the thing they did in Stadium, where it becomes more of a frequent uptime with your rotations, not as much like permanent uptime, but it also means that you can just more frequently move around the map. So there's going to be certain maps, so that's going to feel a little bit better. More of a base kit change, but please give us the strafing back. But yeah. Final one we'll talk about is Wuyang here. I just feel like there's two perks that are generally going to be a little bit better. I think that's changed a little bit right now because I think they've nerfed the cooldown on Wave, and they also made Wave a little bit weaker. I think they did some tweaks to minor perks, but a lot of my criticisms with Wuyang are stuff that you're going to be heard of before. I think of the perks that aren't as picked as often, I think Tri-Shot has situational use, but oftentimes feels like too much of an opportunity cost with the hitbox of how big the orbs are. It tends to chip off of stuff. It also has issues with the armor matchup. It doesn't feel finessed enough. The whole point of his design is finesse shots. Tri-Shot feels like the shotgun approach, which is a little bit strange. But the real criticism for me is going to be more on overflow, because it's the same problem with Juno, where I don't want to be using my mobility cooldown to give me more healing resource. If I'm struggling in Overwatch 2 with Wuyang, the damage support, I need to be opening my angles and providing more value and providing my heal from range. Using my mobility cooldown so I can do more healing on tank is not going to solve the problem, and it misses the entire point of the gameplay loop of Wuyang. If your tank is under a lot of pressure, using your mobility cooldown, which should be used to use more pressure on the backline to deepen your angle, to give you more heal resource, it's the wrong solution with the character design. It's not the way the character is designed. This is not even a subjective opinion. It's facts. The character is a primary fire-focused mobility off-angle support. So when you have something that uses your mobility cooldown, which should be used to allow you to hold angles so you don't die, so you can get more healing resource, no. And you could still argue that balance is still better, even though they've given it a major buff. I think that it needs to start off with a lower cooldown on Wave. I know, shocker, the character's still overperforming. We need to nerf his damage. Absolutely. This is ignoring base kit. Wuyang still needs nerfs. But from a perk design, we need a lower cooldown of Wave, and then we can do different things with Wave. Let's keep going here. I think reducing the heal resource that he has total, or reduce the less heal resource that you regenerate when you use Wave. Don't forget that that's a thing. Should be done. We're talking more base kit stuff before we get to perks. Maybe reduce the duration of the heal amplifier from 3 seconds to 2, I believe, and so on. I think ebb and flow, as in your Wave, the heal needs to be tuned down. Wait, that's already been done. Okay, never mind. Good. Here's another one. Where is the one? What if we had a perk where Wave does more damage depending on the height that you use the Wave? Not healing, but damage. Now you're like, well, isn't that super niche? Well, what if you could scale it off of jumping in the air and using Wave? No, I will not teach you how to Riz. Thank you for the sub. See, here's something to consider here. Right now, Wave is exclusively used for damage. Or for healing, sorry, for self-defense. The damage up close is not all that good, which is a bit odd if you think about it, right? But what if you could amplify that damage by 15 or 20 or even 30 by jumping in the air and then slamming your Wave? So it comes down to where you've actually increased the cast time of your Wave, but you have a higher ceiling for damage. Something to consider. I would love a wall jump spam, where you can be able to double jump off of a wall. It's something that I know that I suggested earlier. Maybe that could be used as a perk. Again, transformative. Or how about another one? You use your shift. So this is your rushing torrent. And when it goes near a target, it boops them back slightly or does like a very small amount of damage, 20 or 30, something like that. So you're actually encouraged to use the wave a little bit more offensively to go and hit people. Now, I know that people are going to have problems with a lot of these designs because they sadly nerfed his health to 225 HP. Wuyang needs nerf, and sadly, once again, I disagree with the health nerf in this regard. I think it completely misses the utility of what this character can and should do with the kit that he currently has. I think he does too much damage at range and doesn't get his damage, doesn't get his hands dirty enough. That being said, I would love if they lean more into the more proactive, more dirty, more slip and slide aspect of Wuyang, using your mobility, using your wave, using your shift, and so on, in much more interesting and transformative ways, bouncing off of walls, hitting people with your wave, doing damage with a wave, jumping in the air, doing for an extra 40, 50 damage, and so on. Heck, you could even do something where he charges his fire charge rate, accelerates by 2 or 3 or 4 meters, so you're able to reach full charge sooner. Now, that wouldn't work with the current damage output that Wuyang has. He does way too much damage with his primary fire. So you'd have to adjust that. But yeah, that's kind of worth pointing out. And I guess this is the one that's been the most challenging one for me because there are so many aspects of his base kit, whether it's his damage output, his HP, and so on, that make him really, really awkward to devise perks for. But I think we kind of had to talk about both at the same time. I want Wuyang to function in more flexible ranges. I want him to be more interesting, more cooldown available character that is more transformative with his cooldowns and isn't just a budget Zenyatta that can bin stuff behind walls. Yeah. Okay, now I know that was a lot. I don't really have a whole lot more to add. The TLDR is that I want stuff that's a lot more transformative, a lot more interesting with the characters that we have. I think overall, all criticisms aside, I think that the perks that we have now compared to the perks that we had in Season 17, compared to the perks that we had whenever the Startward perks came out, maybe that was Season 17, overall the perk system is significantly improved. They've done a great job. I think some of the worst perks in the game in terms of health have been nerfed, removed, and we've had a lot more interesting perks. But as always, you guys know me, we can always push to be better, and my job, at least even if my ideas aren't used, is at least to provoke thought about what the pain points for some of the perks are. And if you guys want some thoughts on my overall criticisms of perks as a whole, I will be having a video coming out soon with problems with perks that kind of discusses in detail the reason why I think it's so important to have like a ceiling of how much value perks can get, why I think transformative needs to happen sooner rather than later, and then just some of the pitfalls that we can fall into with perks as a whole, which crucially is also, we can't just spend entire patches where we just nerf and buff perks. It just feels like a little bit like lazy balancing. So that's my overall criticisms. If you guys have any thoughts and comments, let me know in those comments. And if you guys are looking to support me more, I have a Patreon, link in the description. It's by far the most cash efficient way of supporting me. I don't have greedy Google or Jeff Bezos stealing all the money from me. And you also get access to a lot of real life perks like gym advice. That's a joke. You get to do Patreon, we get early access and a lot of other stuff here. I couldn't think of something fast enough. Shoot, I was going to say foot pictures, but we're not going to be including that in the script. Okay, that is all.